today, December 3rd, is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. The theme for IDPD this year is Leadership and Participation of Persons with Disabilities towards an inclusive, accessible and sustainable post-COVID-19 world. Well, today, the world population is over 7 billion people, and more than 1 billion people, or approximately 15% of that number, live with some form of disability, with 80% living in developing countries. Now, the annual observance of the International Day of Disabled Persons was proclaimed in 1992 by the United Nations General Assembly resolution. It aims to promote the rights and well-being of persons with disabilities in all spheres of society and development, and also to increase awareness of the situation of persons with disabilities in every aspect of political, social, economic, and cultural life. Now we have in the studio Tracy Onabis, a disability inclusion officer with the Inclusive Friends Association, to give us perspective on this issue. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. You're welcome. Now, first, let's talk about the significance of this day. Specifically for you as a person and as for the group that you represent.
Okay. For me as a person, December 3rd is like a beautiful presenter mentioned, is the International Day for Persons with Disabilities. And it's a day where persons with disabilities get this sense of belonging, because it's an avenue for their rights, for our rights, because I'm a person with disability, for our rights to be promoted, for more advocacies to go out on issues that have been, under the carpet over a period of time. It's a day that persons with disabilities have the avenue to interface with stakeholders and let them know issues that are burning, in their lives, and issues that they need urgent attention to be taken care of. As an organization, the Inclusive Friends Association, where I work, December 3rd is a day for us to push more advocacy. We intensify what we've already been doing in the course of the year with specific programs that we've marked out just for this day to celebrate and create awareness on issues of persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about these issues, that are of concern. What are some of the challenges, that we have seen over time here, and, what do we hope to achieve, with the advocacy that we are out to do? Okay,
persons with disabilities face a lot of challenges, and these challenges have been intensified with the advent of the pandemic. Ordinarily, persons with disabilities face discriminations. The employment rate of persons with disabilities in Nigeria particularly is very, very high because of the stigmatization and the stereotypes and hasty generalization of employers when they see persons with disabilities, and a host of others. I can name a lot of things that persons with disabilities are going through. And of course, women and girls with disabilities suffer, too much violation from close persons, the spousal violation, and of course caregivers and all of those things. These are some of the issues that are very, very that are increasing by the day because of the pandemic. So persons with disabilities who go out of the box, who go out of their way to make something good out of themselves, do not have the enabling environment to showcase these abilities. You find a situation where you go to an employer and maybe you submit a CV, you pass that stage, you get to the interview, and you even do, exceptionally well at the interview. But because of your disability, they decide to give that job opportunity to someone else. They do not care if you have the requisite experience to grow that organization. That in itself is a big problem. And of course, the social exclusion of persons with disabilities, where someone brings home a bride who has a disability, whether it's physical or sensory, and the family goes, no, we can't have this one, because they feel disability is contagious. They feel it's hereditary. If they marry that one, he or she, they are going to have children with disabilities and all of those things. So the advocacies that we are pushing out at this point today is going to cover the area of employment, is going to cover speaking up against disability-based violence, which is something my organization has been doing since January this year, where we have been training advocates to go out there and advocate against disability-based violence. There is gender-based violence in the broader spectrum, but disability-based violence is tailored particularly for persons with disabilities, because it is violence that is meted out on a person solely because of their disability. So the advocacies we are putting out today as part of the activities we are going to be having today, my colleagues are going to be having a street interview to talk to people about what they understand by disability. Would you allow your family member to marry a person with disability? Would you want to be in the same house with a person with disability? I've had people tell me that they've never really come close to a person with albinism because they are scared, you know, and all of these things come from what we were told, what they were told growing up. You know, it's a child is born with, if I may use the word, blank, intellect. It is what you feed into that that the child grows up with. So when you see people who discriminate and stigmatize against persons with disabilities, it is because they have been made to believe that that is the norm. Because society sees persons with disabilities as cursed, they see them as celestial beings. In some cases, they see them as consequences of some evil deed. So these advocacies we are putting out is to put a stop to all of these injustices and discriminations and stigmatizations that persons with disabilities face in the workplaces, in their private lives, in the society, in religious organizations. You go to some churches and mosques, at the entrance, you see the steps as if you are climbing the gates to heaven or to paradise. And if I am a wheelchair user, I want to go to church and worship. When I get there, seeing the almighty steps, what do? There is no ramp. And of course, other fellow worshippers will just be walking by. Nobody would even want to know, do I want to get in or something? Maybe they would think, oh, she's here for a miracle, she wants to get healed. But not every disability is curable. Right. You know, Jesus healed some persons with disabilities in the Bible, but of course he did not heal everybody because not every disability. So these discriminations are everywhere. These barriers are everywhere. They could be attitudinal, that is from people's behavior, people's perception, people's attitude in all of the spaces we go to.
Okay. Now, how would you, describe the status of disability rights in Nigeria?
Okay. First of all, I would like to appreciate the present administration. That's the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, who kindly passed the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities law in 2018. That was a huge, in fact, it is a huge milestone in the disability community because a lot of work has been going on before that time, up until he passed the law. And he also went ahead to establish the Disability Commission, which is charged with the responsibility of running with the vision of persons with disabilities and see that they have a complete mechanism, they have places to channel all of their requests and all of those things. Now, for the status of disability law in Nigeria, I know that presently quite a number of states have domesticated the disability law, but that is not enough. It's not enough to domesticate it. Like when we ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities as a nation in 2007, the disability law was passed in 2018. How many years after, right? So we have a number of states who have also domesticated these laws, but are there implementations?
We have, from the records, we have 23 states that have neglected the disability rights.
Yes, that's so 22 have neglected out of 36. You do the maths, you get. So when we say, okay, for the states that have implemented, domesticated it, how far have they gone in implementing the provisions of these laws? There is a particular section that provides, for instance, 5% quota of employment for persons with disabilities. Which state can say, okay, they have this number of persons with disabilities actively engaged in service? It's not enough to say, okay, we've given 50 persons with disabilities in each local government jobs. What do they do in those places where you employ them? Because some just employ persons with disabilities in name only. They come there, they sit all day. They do not provide reasonable accommodation for them to be able to be productive and add value to that agency or department. So that is not employment, if you ask me. If I'm not doing anything, I'm coming to sit and you pay me. You go out there and, everybody claps and all of that. But I, as the person you have employed, you are not adding value to my life. And I am not adding value to the organization, which is what I was supposed to do. So yes, the laws have been domesticated, but how far have we gone with implementation? So that is why more advocacies need to go at like what we are already doing to see that there is active implementation, not just in theory, but in practice of the provisions of this law. Okay,
so we'll talk more, about, the laws and implementation and all that. But I want you to talk about the role of culture in failing, some of the stereotypes that we see in the belief, the thinking, around the society when it comes to relating with persons with disabilities.
Okay. Like they taught us back in the days, culture is the way of life of a group of people, right? So I mentioned something earlier that every child is born open. There is nothing in their minds. They just come clean. But when a child is born, like for instance, let me just use myself as an example to explain this. Yes. In the community where I grew up in Edo State, I and my siblings were the only kids with albinism in my particular clan. So you see in a group of 50 children would stand out like suspects, and everybody would run. Some would chant, this Nigerian popular nursery rhyme, Oyibo Pepe, that kind of thing. And it is because they've seen adults do it. It's because adults have told them that persons with albinism, don't go close to them. If you go close to them, this, that. So that is why they do all of those things. And in some cultures in Nigeria where they kill twins, they throw children with disabilities in the river because they feel they are curses, or the gods of the land are angry, so they try to punish the child with children with disabilities. It is because those who are doing it presently, or who did it at the time, have seen their elders do it. So some of these wrong, cultural norms, they need to be checked. There are some parts of Nigeria today where they still kill persons with albinism because they feel that, I don't know whatever their reasons are, they don't want persons with albinism in the society. Something they have albinism in the society because an ancestor had slept with a white man, the colonial masters and all of those things. So when you have a child with albinism, they kill them. Yeah. And others for ritual purposes. Something when you kill persons with disability, like there was a time a guy who has a hunchback was killed and only the hunch was taken away. Because they have the belief that hunch was going to produce money. They were going to use the hunch for rituals. So all of these wrong cultural beliefs, they are violations of fundamental rights, both as per provisions of local instruments and international instruments. You don't just grab a person and maim them or kill them for selfish reasons because of erroneous beliefs. So that is why advocacy is going out in all states, in every corner. Many OPDs and CSOs are pushing these messages that all of these cultural beliefs need to be stopped. And we should not pass these messages on to the forthcoming generations so that persons with disabilities, because disability is not about to end anytime soon until there is rapture. It's like poverty. It cannot end. There is no two ways about it. You're either born with a disability or you earn it at any point during your life cycle. I know somebody will say, God forbid, but it happens. So we need to put a stop to all of these things. So we or our loved ones do not fall victim to these things. We are blatantly ignoring now because we feel it's none of our business. We are not the ones who wear the shoe, so it doesn't pinch.
Now, talking about, the next generation, let's talk about children with disabilities. There was a time I met this very young boy. I think he was 2 years old, and then he came out to play. And all the children started running, oh, Oyibo, just like you've mentioned, Oyibo, everybody was running, and he wanted to play, with his children. And then his mother came out. She almost cried, because she saw the discrimination, that was happening towards that child. Many would say for children, it's a different kind of feeling. So what, do you have any form, of advocacy or a platform where you can talk about children with disabilities and how to encourage them to belong to a society despite that discrimination?
Okay. So for children with disabilities, like you mentioned, right? They are still very young, and they do not even understand yet why they are different from other children in the society. They just find that they are treated differently because the adults in the lives of the other children have made them understand that this is what is obtainable, which is erroneous in its nature. Okay, so children with disabilities, there are organizations who are particularly working to create separate spaces for children with disabilities to thrive. But what we are advocating for is an all-inclusive society where we do not have to separate children with disabilities from children without disabilities. Now we're talking, for instance, inclusive education, which entails having children with disabilities go to the same schools with children without disabilities. Let them interact. Let them mix up. Disability is not contagious. If a child with albinism hugs a child without albinism, the child without albinism does not automatically become a child with albinism. Or a child who has autism spectrum disability is not transferable by touch or anything, right? So we are looking at a situation where children without disabilities are made to socialize with children with disabilities. And this will breed a future where we have adults who are more open and accommodating. That is adults without disabilities. And then we have adults with disabilities who are more confident. Because when these other children make these snide remarks, against children with disabilities, they shrink. They don't want to associate with them anymore. They want to just go hide in the corner. I was a victim of that. Up until the point I decided, okay, if this is the way it's going to go, I'm going to be in those spaces. and there's nothing you're going to do about it. But not every child can come to that point where they decide that it's all or nothing. Some hide out forever.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll talk more on that shortly. Let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll talk more, about, children, education, and the need to change the narrative. Please stay with us. All right, thank you for staying with us. And if you're just joining, you're watching Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja. We are discussing the International Day for persons living with disability, and we have in the studio Tracy Onabis, Disability Inclusion Officer, talking about the narratives and the need to change them. Now, just before we went on break, we were talking about children and how they get exposed, some of these stigma and stereotypes. The first place of exposure for the child is school, at least for many children, is school. How about the role of teachers, in changing these narratives? Because sometimes the children, they don't even know that they have some kind of, what they have is disability until when they begin to see how other people behave, towards them and all of that. So this idea of having school for children or persons with disability different, or this kind of categorization or segregation and all of that, how is that helping, to change these things? Okay,
so before I answer that question, you said persons living with disabilities. The excuse me, the proper thing is persons with disabilities. When you say living, is like disability is your housemate.
Okay.
Yes, so it's persons with disabilities and not persons living with disabilities.
All right.
Yes, so a lot of people have that mix up all the time, but we're trying to subtly change that. Okay, so now the role of teachers, that's a very, very serious issue right now. Because some teachers, like we're talking all the while, is because of what they also believe. Because of the things they've seen in society, they've been programmed to see disability as a very difficult thing. And when they have children with disabilities in their classes, that is if they allow the child at all. Because I've had cases of teachers tell children with disabilities to go home, go to the streets, what are you doing here? I don't have time for this, I cannot deal with this. So if they allow the child with disabilities at all, most teachers do not pay attention to the needs of that particular child. For instance, a child who has albinism in a classroom, low vision, serious low vision comes with albinism, right? When I was in school, I was not able to see the blackboard from my seat. And when I would leave my seat to go and look, so I would be able to know what is written and writing. If I go more than twice, my teacher would say, come on, sit down, you're the only person in this class. They did not understand that I needed to go and see really close for me to be able to decipher what they have written, so as to be able to understand what was being taught. So there's need for teachers to be brought together and for their capacity to be built on disability issues. I'm just using albinism as an instance because of myself. But I have a friend who has a physical disability, and as far as tertiary institutions, lecturers tell you expressly that you should leave the classes. You should go to the streets. The school is not meant for you. Or go to a special school, go to a different school. where they have assistive devices for your needs. But why not create the enabling environment? Give that student maybe extra time, for instance, because of the nature of their impairment, so that they can meet up with their peers. And you see that those who are given those little opportunities, they do exceedingly well. I've never seen a person with disability. I know, yes, as we have it with persons without disabilities, so also we have persons with disabilities who are not that smart. But for those who set their mind to studying, they do it exceptionally well, and they come out with good grades. So teachers need to create allowances for children with disabilities. Find out what are their disability needs. Does this child need to, for those who are hard of hearing, who are deaf, you will talk all day. They do not understand. All schools need to start teaching sign languages so that children can interact with children who are deaf. Or a sign language interpreter can interpret what the teacher is saying so that the child without disability is not left behind. This is part of the SDGs, leave no one behind. When we do not take into cognizance the needs, the particular needs of that child with disability, you know, vis-a-vis the type of disability the child has, you will be excluding that child and you'll be leaving that child behind. So that is not education in any sense, if you ask me. So their capacity needs to be built on disability issues, what it is, what it entails, what they need to do to make the school an enabling environment so that when other children bully these children, they can safely come to the teacher and say, oh ma, sir, look at what this person did. And the teacher would handle it diplomatically and he would put a stop to it. But not you even cheering the bully on and like, you're not happy that he's playing with you or something. If you don't like it, go home. They make all of these statements all the time, and it's traumatizing for that child. Some children with disabilities don't want to go back to school because they make jest of them. Some teachers will bring out a child with disability and you know, use them as an example of something very, very funny and unpleasant.
Right. So what would you say would be the role, you know, for parents in this regard?
Okay. He mentioned that the first place of learning for children is the school. But for me, I think the first place of learning and the most important place for learning is the home.
Right.
At school is only a formal setting. But at home is informal because that is where they see all of the examples. That is why you have children from an abusive home. They are aggressive. Any little thing they want to fight. So if you as a parent, you are out there, you're walking on the road, you see a child with disability, you see anybody with disability, because you see them everywhere, under the bridges. Don't try to hide your child, you know, under your skirt or something, as if they are going to contact something from that person. You be the example. Walk up to the person. I'm not saying give out arms or something. Walk up to the person and say, oh, hi, how are you? How is the weather? How are you feeling today? What are you doing here? Do you go to school or something? And let your child see that example. But when you see a person with disability and you are hiding your child away, or like in some funny cases where a pregnant woman is walking and they see a person with disability and they pinch the stomach front and back so that the disability does not jump into it. It happens, you know. It happens. When I was pregnant with my child, they told me to wear a pin because we are going to do a program at Karamajiji. There's a disability colony there. So they said, no. The first time they allowed me, they didn't know. But when we got there, one woman brought me this safety pin and I should pin it on my shirt that this community, you know, it doesn't happen. There's no scientific explanation for that. So as parents, we should be the example. Let us tell our children. My children in the school, they have kids with disabilities. So when my daughter got home, she was like, Mommy, there's this girl in my school that cannot walk. She was trying to imitate the way the child. I'm like, it's not that she cannot walk. She walks differently. I told her, when you see her tomorrow, don't run. Say hello and go to your class. She was like, okay. Then she came back one day and said their teacher took her own class to the class of children with disabilities to play. I was like, wow, that is amazing. So as parents, what we tell our children matters. If you tell your children that when you see a child with disability, chant Oyibo Pepe as if your whole life depends on it, because some do it with so much glee, like they derive joy from saying Oyibo Pepe when you walk past adults, and this is because their parents allowed it. So we should be the role models for our children, not just in areas of disability, even old age. You see children, they see an elder, they don't even care, they don't greet you, they walk past because their parents let them get away with such things. So when we want an inclusive society, we parents have a lot to do. It's in our hands, because what we teach our children that the school will only reinforce. The school cannot force your child to know what you as the parent do not want them to know. So let's model the right behavior towards persons with disabilities, the right attitude towards persons with disabilities for our children.
Okay. Now, just before we go, I want us to talk about, you know, traditional rulers, if they have a role here, and what kind of collaboration do we need to have between, you know, persons with disability and traditional rulers to change some of this narrative. Like we mentioned, you know, how instrumental culture, you know, beliefs and all of that.
Yeah. Okay, so in one of the research we did this year at my organization, we had the opportunity of visiting the traditional ruler Riyom in Plateau State. Yes. So when I asked him a question that, sir, if by, there's this thing that happens traditionally where titles pass from fathers to son.
Right.
So I asked him if by tradition, there's a title in your cabinet that passes from a father to a child with a disability, an adult with a disability. Would you let the person take the seat, or would you pass it over to somebody without disability? And he said, of course, he would let the person have the seat if that is what the tradition dictates. Then I asked him, okay, do you have any person with disability in your present cabinet, not those who have to inherit the title? And he said, currently there is none. Okay. So, but traditional rulers have a major role to play. First of all, in ending all of these wrong and deadly cultural beliefs that are fatal to the lives of persons with disabilities. It is what the traditional ruler says it is, that it will be. The ancestors who made the laws, they are dead and gone. They cannot come and haunt you. Forget that thing. Right? So traditional rulers should be able to put a stop to honor killings, to harmful traditional practices where they cut body parts of persons with disabilities or they throw them in the river. And of course, be open to collaborate with persons with disabilities in your communities. If you are calling for meetings of clan members, community members to discuss anything, make sure that persons with disabilities are also invited. You know where they are. Do not ignore them and expect that the message will pass to them. Persons with disabilities are as much part of the community as persons without disabilities on an equal basis. So whenever you are passing information, you are having ceremonies, you are having events, traditional rulers need to bring persons with disabilities on board. And the best way they can do that is by having persons with disabilities in their cabinet. That would be the best person to disseminate information, to coordinate and mobilize persons with disabilities to interface with traditional rulers. And traditional rulers should use their offices to advocate for inclusion of persons with disabilities, to advocate for the respect of of the dignity of persons with disabilities, to advocate to stop the stereotype and stigmatization of persons with disabilities within their community, so that those persons can live an independent and productive life within that community.
Well, thank you so much. It's been, quite interesting getting to hear, some of the challenges and the whole conversation about, inclusiveness of persons with disabilities. We've been speaking with Tracy Onabis, Disability Inclusion Officer with the Inclusive Friends Association. Thank you so much for coming on the program, and we hope to have you next time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
You're welcome.